I'm just going to simplify it in one sentence. Humans with AI will outperform those without.
All right, you guys are in for a treat because the topic is why great leaders hire smarter, and we literally have one of the greatest leaders in the world in business right here, who I'm sitting next to. So let's just dive in. We're going to dive into hiring. Let's just start with, you've built some of the most amazing teams over the years. What's your cheat code? What do you look for when you're looking to hire talent?
Well, I remember learning this later on when I went to Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg was interviewing me for the role, and he said, you think your job is going to be to build Facebook's business, but your real job is to hire people better than you. And nobody had ever said that to me, so that was 20 years into my career. And I don't think I quite really understood it for the first couple of years. I would describe myself at Facebook those first 2 years as a whack-a-mole leader, like if you were at a carnival.
Sure.
For every problem, I'd get on a plane, go see the client, go see the team, talk to the press, whatever needed to be done. And then you start to realize that this thing, Facebook, was so much bigger than any individual, and that actually the only way to even come close to potentially achieving the potential was to scale. And once that light bulb went off, I realized that I needed to surround myself with people that were better than I was, that had strengths that I did not have or expertise, and then the collective, when I brought them together, could do things that no one ever thought was imaginable. And I systematically built a team with that in mind. And the litmus test for me was if Mark or Cheryl had called on that Monday morning and said, hey, it's great you hired Steven to run EMEA or North America or whatever, I think you should report to Steven. We're going to make some changes. And I tested myself, would I throw up and want to run out the door? Or I would be like, actually, Steven's really amazing. Yeah, of course, I get it. And that was the litmus test.
So let's kind of double click into that for a second, because amazing is it's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. But what characteristics? Is it about their functional, background or past, their expertise? What about their personality? What culturally were you looking for? And how did you do that differently from Facebook to when you were at Viacom or Microsoft? Were there different things you had to look for at Facebook that you didn't look for previously?
So I think you learn, right, as you go through your career. But to me, the most important thing is culture. My favorite business saying is culture eats strategy for breakfast. I say it all the time. I use it in most of my presentations. And then, okay, well, what's culture? And for me, I had to be very clear about the set of qualities that I was looking for. And it turns out, when I really did a lot of thinking, it was around human qualities. There are 12 of them. I won't go through every one of them, but there are things like authenticity, bravery. I wanted people, and at Facebook this was especially the case, there was no playbook. No one handed us a job description or manual and said, here's how you do your job. We were inventing it, so you had to be brave. Curiosity, like a deep intellectual curiosity so that you're never satisfied with status quo, was really important. Diversity with a huge capital D. People that looked for diversity of thought from a number of areas, the traditional ones that we talk about, but also educational background, geographical diversity, those things were important. Empathy. I think when you're starting something on the magnitude of Facebook and most technology companies, or I would argue any company that has customers, you have to have empathy to walk in the customer's shoes. You have to have empathy if you're not an engineer, to understand what it's like to have all of these product priorities thrown at you and how do you prioritize that. So that was important. I wanted generosity. People that would spend the time with junior people, would mentor, would sponsor them. I wanted humility. transparency, and vulnerability. And vulnerability, it turns out, was probably one of the most important things, because there were so many instances where none of us knew exactly what to do. And you have to be willing to like come together and say, okay, how are we going to solve this together? And that takes vulnerability, because leaders are supposed to have some of the answers. And there were a lot of times we didn't.
Yeah, interesting. So, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out here, and some of them are trying to get money. A lot of them are trying to get money. When you look to make a personal investment in someone, do you approach it the same way as hiring? Like, what do you look for in an entrepreneur? When you've written a personal check to invest in a company, how much of it's the company versus the person, and what do you look at in the person that may be different from when you were hiring?
So, there's this Facebook saying that we had, and I think you use it at Oceans, the what would you do if you weren't afraid? There is something in the DNA of an entrepreneur that, yes, you might have fears at night. I talk to many entrepreneurs that sometimes have trouble putting their head down on the pillow and sleeping restfully. But generally speaking, they've got a belief inside of them that whatever they're trying to do can be done, and that they are uniquely suited to go do that. So I'll give you a big company example of that. I sit on the board of Under Armour. So Kevin Plank started Under Armour out of his basically college dorm room, similar to what Mark did, but he was selling shirts, t-shirts, and shorts and things for athletes. And fast forward 20 plus years later, and Under Armour is a global company and outfitting top sports teams around the world. When you see Kevin in the boardroom or walking around, there is like an infectious energy, and it's like no one is going to sit there and tell him it can't be done. And that is a unique entrepreneurial, I think, quality. I don't think it's a skill. I think it's innate and it's deep. And so I look for that. I sometimes look for, in the case of Kevin, I didn't know him back then, but he was an athlete trying to solve a problem. There's a company I invested in, former Facebook woman, who is working to solve basically how do you take care of aging parents that have dementia or Alzheimer's using technology. Her dad has Alzheimer's. She is as driven as any human being to get that solution for him. And she lives and breathes it. So those are the things that I look for. I look for people that are not motivated by money. I remember when I was interviewing at Wall Street many, many, many years ago, and it was with Lehman Brothers, who's no longer here, but I'll distinctly remember the guy interviewing me put me in this tiny little room, and he said, "So what drives you?" And I gave an answer. It was 3 different things. It was like people I work with, things I'm passionate about. And he's like, "Where's money? How can you not be driven by money? Do you know that you're like at Lehman Brothers, like an investment bank?" And I looked at him, and I'll never forget his face. And I was like, if I check the box on all those other things, I'm pretty sure things will turn out okay financially. And I think entrepreneurs that have the courage to not sell their company when the first offer comes, and to fight it out because they believe. I look for that. I look for resilience and grit.
So you probably have seen him and gone to him and said, "I think I did okay, huh? What do you think?"
Well, I don't know where he is, because that bank is no longer around. But
let's kind of switch gears for a second, just on mentorship. You mentor a lot of entrepreneurs, executives, and I know women in tech is really important to you. So talk about, when you're mentoring female entrepreneurs or talking to women executives, because there's a lot of women out here starting companies. Is there anything specifically you say to them differently, or how you approach advice with females building companies than someone else?
Yeah, so I think that I actually do less mentoring, and I do more sponsoring, and I do more being somebody that an entrepreneur and a CEO can confide in and really open up and be vulnerable. I try to create that space because it's lonely. When you are at the top of a company or a founder, it's really lonely. There's very few people you feel like you can talk to and be vulnerable. For women in particular, I actually think it's the greatest time to be women in tech because every company is trying to recruit more at every level. And I think sometimes when we say women in tech, we think automatically you have to code. I've never written a full sentence, a full line of code in my entire career. I tried and I was terrible at it. I don't think I could comprehend it. But I have enormous respect for engineering and product talent. Women can be in tech and do many different jobs. They can be on the business side, they can be in product, they can be in the engineering team, and every company is eager to have a diversity of thought at the table. So I think there's never been a better time.
That's great. That's I was just at a conference where I know Melinda French Gates was speaking. She's putting a lot of her resources behind female entrepreneurs, and we agree. I think it's an incredible time, and people like you that are helping kind of women all over build companies, and it is an incredible time, which brings me to AI. We can't be at a tech conference without talking about AI. Everyone's talking about AI, but especially as it relates to talent, right? I think how you sit on 3 major boards, major company, Fortune, whatever, 10, 20 boards. How are you're also in a private equity environment, so you're seeing the gamut. What are the conversations going on in the boardroom about how AI is going to impact the workforce?
Well, I mean, I think the board meetings are very different when you're sitting at a Disney, Coca-Cola, or Under Armour versus a startup, and then private equity is kind of somewhere in the middle. I'll tell you what's consistent, and then I'll talk about AI. What is consistent is talent is on the agenda in every board meeting that at least I participate in, because again, back to the culture eat strategy for breakfast, you can take a C/B level company in terms of their product market fit. If you have an exceptional talent team around you, that team's gonna figure it out. They're gonna pivot when they need to, they're gonna adapt, they're gonna be agile, and can turn it around. Equally, you can have an A+ product with a kind of average team, and they will blow it. And it happens over and over and over again. And the mistake that I see is that people don't spend enough time on people. That's recruiting, continuing to network externally, and of course, internally retaining your best talent. On AI, I would say it's funny. I have different lenses to this. From being from Facebook and Instacart and Microsoft, like AI didn't just appear when ChatGPT entered the world in November of 2022. But the world suddenly woke up in November of 2022, and then it was like urgent. It was like, what is the AI strategy? How are we implementing it? Are we going to be disrupted? How would you take it from the mundane of customer service and optimizing HR and finance and legal functions all the way to, can you use it to optimize growth, totally transform your marketing? And so all those conversations are going on at every size company. What I've been really amazed by is a company like Coca-Cola sells beverages, and so you may not think like, oh, they're going to be one of the first ones to jump on that train. And they were the first consumer product good company to partner with OpenAI way back when, and they have now systematically implemented AI in practically all of their major business functions. And to see it and really become ingrained in that culture, that gives me enormous, yes, the leadership's exceptional, but it gives me hope that if 100-plus-year-old company can embrace it, that any company can think about how it might impact. I believe wholeheartedly this is the biggest technological revolution that any of us will see in our lifetime that's here. And there's a range of ages in this audience. I don't think we're going to see anything else like this. I think it's going to dwarf everything else we've seen. Check. You know what's the bigger issue? Change management. Because a lot of the things that AI will be able to do is going to require people to be like, I'm okay getting disrupted out of my job, or I'm okay having AI potentially make me do better at my job. And when I was in Cannes last week, I had a conversation about this, and one of my panelists I thought had a great quote. He said, you know what, I'm just going to simplify it in one sentence. Humans with AI will outperform those without. Period, end of story. And I was like, that's a pretty good summary, so there you go.
Right, so you think, and the conversations you're having, because I think there's a major societal question, which is how many jobs get replaced versus it just makes you better at your job. It allows you to do things that are more high value. Where, and listen, we're going to see how this plays out. It's going to be probably a combo of both, but I'm curious, again, with from the perspective of how you see the world and the conversations you're involved with, are companies thinking about the societal impact or more just like, let's just get better right now?
Yeah, I think they are thinking about it because, I mean, there are estimates out of MIT and Harvard in particular that have been studying this for a while, that upwards of 30 to 50% of jobs as we know it today will be gone within the next call it by 2030, 5 to 6 years. That would dramatically change society, right? So if you think that actually could happen, then there's really only two ways to deal with that from a societal and geopolitical standpoint. One would be that there's a whole set of jobs that none of us even know are going to exist yet, and those companies are going to be hiring. And by the way, that is what has happened with every other major technical revolution. So maybe it follows patterns, and there are data centers being built now on parcels of land in the United States that people would have written off. It was farmland or old manufacturing that died 30 years ago. And guess what? They're coming in. Okay, well, that's going to totally change those local economies again for the better. So I think there's going to be a whole set of jobs that will be very good. Now, if we're wrong about that, and the equation nets out that a lot of people are without proper employment, then you're going to have major societal unrest unless you have universal income or some way of making people feel that there's a way to actually satisfy the Maslow hierarchy of needs for their family, right? Every family just wants to earn enough to be able to provide shelter, feed their family, and educate them, and hopefully have access to great health care. So we're getting more into my political views around that, but it's going to go one of two ways, in my view.
Well, so we're going to end on a very positive note here, right?
Yeah, because now we've scared everybody that there's going to be no job. So we have to come back positively.
No, I think as you said, right, like this is going to be, and we've lived through the internet revolution, the mobile revolution, the cloud revolution. This is happening at a pace that we haven't seen in the past, and totally agree that this is the biggest of them all that we've in our lifetime for sure. But since we're at the biggest tech event of the year for New Jersey entrepreneurs, if there's one piece of advice every founder building, all these budding entrepreneurs and who are out here could do to build a better company, build it in New Jersey, what piece of advice would you leave everyone with?
Hire people better than you. I'm gonna end where I started. So, you will only be as good as the people you surround yourself with.
On that note, couldn't have said it any better. It's something that when we built our firm, and I'm very lucky to work with two people that work with Carolyn for years, it is all about the people. So don't forget that as you leave here. If there's one thing to talk about with your family and friends. And thanks, Carolyn. It's great.
Thank
Always
you
fun.
for having me. Thanks.